What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so I finally got some unrelated to Charlie Kirk news. As a matter of fact, check this out. Judge blocks Trump administration from deporting Guatemalan migrant children. Okay, so I feel really bad for these kids right here. They've been trying to get back to their parents for a while now, since before the Trump administration, since before Trump came back into office. As a matter of fact, they've been trying to get back home, and Trump is trying to get them there, but once again, the judges, they don't care about these kids, and they just want to keep them here because of optics, because they don't want to be the ones that sent migrant children out of the country back to their families, because they're worried about putting them in danger. Well, you know what? The journey here was very dangerous. The journey home will not be, not at all, and that's where they belong, right? If parents don't have rights to keep their children. Now, you might ask, well, why did they let their kids go in the first place? And I agree. Why did they? But let's get into this. A federal judge on Thursday blocked President Donald Trump's administration from immediately deporting Guatemalan migrant children who came to the U.S. alone back to their home country, the latest step in a court struggle over one of the most sensitive issues in Trump's hardline immigration agenda. The decision by U.S. District Judge Timothy J. Kelly comes after the Republican administration's Labor Day weekend attempt to remove Guatemalan migrant children who were living in government shelters and foster care. Yeah, they've been living here for a while. They came across that southern border as unaccompanied minors. Yeah, sorry, I don't know why that was so hard to get out. Minors. But, so the Trump administration, their immigration crackdown agenda, they got in touch with all of these kids' parents, right? And all the ones that they could get in touch with that said, yes, we want our children back because we're not going to keep them here. We're going to send them back out of the country. They said, yes, we'll take our kids back. They decided we're going to deport these kids. The rest of the kids, the unaccompanied minors, yeah, they're not doing that because there's nowhere for these kids to go, and they don't have any sort of parents. We can't get in touch with their parents, and they don't have a guardian or anything like that, so we can't just send them to a country and let them run free, right? So they're going to keep them here in the country under foster care, probably give them some kind of DACA access or something like that. You never know, but yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, folks. I just don't understand these people that can send their kids on this treacherous journey where they'll probably be killed, and 90% chance that they'll be put into some sort of trafficking situation, right? Which is a sad state of affairs. Your kid is going to be tortured, essentially. There's a 90% chance your kid gets tortured, and you're going to do it anyway. Maybe the kids lost their parents, but I don't know. I have no idea what the home situation was for these kids that came to this country. But the cartels make buttloads of money off of this, and the Biden administration was propping it up, and Donald Trump said, no, we're not going to do this anymore, folks. It's too much, just death and destruction comes from this. Trump administration officials said they were seeking to reunify children with their parents who wanted them returned home. But that explanation crumbled like a house of cards about a week later. Kelly, who was nominated by Trump, wrote, There is no evidence before the court that the parents of these children sought their return. Yes, there is. Homeland Security Assistant Secretary Tricia McLaughlin, in a statement, insisted on the administration's initial claims that parents requested being reunited with their children. This judge is blocking efforts to reunify children with their families. Now these children will have to go to shelters, McLaughlin said, all just to get Trump. This is disgraceful and immoral. A spokesperson for the Department of Health and Human Services did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Advocates for the children also submitted a whistleblower account to the court that suggests many of the children who were found eligible for deportation had likely been victims of child abuse, like death threats, gang violence, and human trafficking, Kelly noted in his order. Yes, this is because for some reason they were sent out, and they were, once again, subjected to these things. This is not to say that their parents back home in Guatemala did any of this to them. And once again, they're not addressing the issue of the parents. The judge just, in his derangement, said, I don't think that the Trump administration got in touch with these parents. The court saw through the government's repeated misrepresentations of critical facts to try to justify the indefensible targeting of vulnerable children who would have faced danger if forcibly sent to other countries. Elfin C. Olivares, Vice President of Litigation and Legal Strategy at the National Immigration Law Center, said in a statement. What does that have to do with anything? Like, wouldn't you just get a random statement from somebody at the Immigration Law Center? Like, what? Did that guy represent these kids? You didn't say that, did you? So I must be led to believe that this was just a random statement from a random person who prefers open borders and lots and lots and lots of human trafficking. I'm forced to believe that because that's what that statement tells me. There was already a temporary order in place preventing the removal of Guatemalan children, but that was set to expire Tuesday. Kelly granted a preliminary injunction extends that temporary protection indefinitely, although the government can appeal. Kelly did rebuff advocates' push to block the removal of children from additional countries, though he said any attempt to remove those children in a similar way would likely be unlawful. Who said anything about sending them to other countries? From additional countries. What? They want to send them back to their home country of Guatemala. It's weird. Legal advocates working with kids in needs of defense visited Honduras last week and found government officials and non-governmental organizations working furiously to receive as many as 400 children back from the United States. What does that have to do with this case, though? Once again, there are also temporary restraining orders in separate cases in Arizona and Illinois, but those cases are much more narrow in the scope of children they cover, underlining the importance of the Washington case. In a late-night operation August 30th, the administration notified shelters where migrant children traveling alone initially live after they cross the U.S.-Mexico border that they would be returning the children to Guatemala and that they needed to have the kids ready to leave in a matter of hours. Our clients were terrified. Many had tear-soaked faces, and some were visibly shaking with fear. Michon Rowe, directing attorney at the National Center for Youth Law, one of the plaintiff attorneys, said in a statement. I don't believe that, by the way, unless there's something that the people at the place did to induce that in these children for some reason. Because why would a kid start crying if they said, hey, your parents want you back and we're going to send you back to your parents? Are their parents bad people? Kind of doesn't matter, does it? Kind of doesn't. Because we have no right to these kids, as a matter of fact. Even if they do go back into a bad situation, right? Who are we to stop these people from having their kids back? Like, I know this is a tough one, right? Like, I'm kind of riding the line between, yeah, we should keep them, but at the same time, what if some of these kids were stolen from their parents, right? What if that's the case here? And this judge is keeping these kids from their parents. Yeah, who is to say that they weren't stolen? Like there wasn't some sort of scheme from the cartels to steal these kids, send them to the United States to make money off of these kids. Who is to say that? Like, how do we know the difference? Once again, we don't. We have no freaking clue. All we know is that the parents want their kids back. We don't know the circumstances which led their kids to end up here in the United States. We have no idea. So it's our duty to get these kids back home. That's what I say. Because once again, yeah, sure. Is there a possible chance that they might go back into a similar situation? Yes. But once again, possibilities are possibilities, folks. We cannot rule based upon possibilities. We must rule based upon the law. We must rule based upon these parents' rights to keep their kids. That's what I say about that. Contractors for Immigration and Customs Enforcement picked up the Guatemalan children from shelters and foster care, transported them to the airport. The government has said in court filings that it identified 457 children for possible removal to Guatemala, although that list was eventually whittled down to 327. In the end, 76 got as far as boarding planes in El Paso and Harlingen, Texas on August 31st, and were set to depart to Guatemala in what the government described as the first phase. Bertilda Lopez, 17-year-old son, was among those slated to be sent to Guatemala. Okay, a 17-year-old, that's almost an adult. I don't care about that one. Get him out of the freaking country. Over Labor Day weekend, he called his family late at night to tell them he was being sent home, and she drove through the night to get to the capital. She expressed mixed feelings about the judge's decision Thursday. As a mother, I want him to be well, whether that's sending him home or him being locked up there, Lopez said. Maybe it's better that they send him back because he's really sad. The way things are there in the U.S., it bothers me that my son is locked up. Elizabeth Toca, who is sponsoring the boy and hopeful he will be allowed to stay, said she's still hoping she will be able to get him out of custody and give him a better life. These people are deranged, folks. This person, oh my God, wants to keep this child from his mother. That's what this person wants. Oh, and it's all compassion, folks. I want to give him a better life, so I'm going to steal this kid from his mother. These people are nuts. They're lunatics, and they're deranged. Guatemala's government declined to comment, saying only that it was in an internal U.S. justice process. Yeah, what else can they say? Immigration and children's advocates who have been alerted of possible efforts to remove Guatemalan minors immediately sued the Trump administration to prevent the children's removal. The advocates argued that many of these children were fleeing abuse or violence in their home countries and that the government was bypassing long-standing legal procedures meant to protect young migrants from being returned to potentially abusive or violent places. This was a tragedy in the making that was barely averted thanks to the tireless efforts of advocates across the country who saw that children were being endangered and raised the alarm. Cheyenne Aber, executive director of the Acadia Center for Justice, said in a statement, how does this lady know the specific situation of each one of these kids? How does she know they were in abusive situations? She doesn't know that. She doesn't know that these kids may have been kidnapped from their home and then trafficked into the United States. She doesn't know that at all. Another federal judge in Washington granted advocates a temporary restraining order, largely preventing the Trump administration from removing Guatemalan migrant children in its care, except in limited circumstances where an immigration judge had already ordered their removal after reviewing their cases. That initial 14-day order was set to expire on Sunday, and then Kelly extended it through Tuesday to give him extra time to examine the case. The government has argued that it has the right to return the children in its care, and it was acting at the behest of the Guatemalan government. But the government walked back an initial claim alleging the parents requested their children be sent back. The Guatemalan government has said that it was concerned over minors in U.S. custody who were going to turn 18 and would be then at risk of being turned over to adult detention facilities. So, send these kids back, for goodness sakes. We cannot take in the world's kids. I know that may sound a little bit callous, right? But once again, folks, we have no idea. We just don't know. You can ask the kids. Some of these kids, they don't know the difference, right? They don't know what's going on. They may just want to lie to stay here, for crying out loud. Some of them might. You just don't know. I think if we can reunite these kids back with their parents, that's a good thing. We can't take care of the world, for goodness sakes. And once again, if you want to send your kids to the United States, do it the right way. You can't just send them through cartel territory and expect them to come into the United States and have a better life. I'm sorry. Like that's just delusional thinking right there, folks. Seriously. Just none of it makes any sense, y'all. And then to put your kid in that situation in the first place. But once again, like I was saying, we have no idea. These kids, some of them may have been kidnapped. We just don't know. But that 17-year-old, I could care less about that one. He's almost an adult. Send him back. That's all I can say about that, but I think I've rambled on for long enough. Y'all let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Am I way off the mark on this? Am I being too harsh about it? Let me know what you think. Hey, you never know, folks. It could be heartless. I don't know. I don't think so, though. Because imagine being put in that situation. Your kid gets kidnapped, right? And you don't go to the local authorities because they're garbage and corrupt. So what do you do about that? The cartel stole your kids. And then all of a sudden, one day you get a call from a government official saying, hey, the U.S. wants to know if you want your kid back. Your kid ended up in the United States. And you say yes. And then a federal judge in the United States said no. Think about that for a second. Then y'all smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. And click that join button. Sign up, become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow. But outside of all that, you guys remember that God is always with us. And He loves each and every one of you out there. So y'all try to have a good day and stay logical. Peace.